So in this video, we're going to look at section 9.4. It's the last section that we're going to do this semester, and it's on applications of systems of equations. So systems of equations can be used in practical situations where there are two unknowns, like two things we're trying to figure out. And some examples are they're often used in supply and demand in business. They're used in physics for velocity and acceleration. They're used in money and interest. And then the last part is they're used in mixture problems in physics and chemistry. Okay, so what we're going to do is you're going to be given a scenario, a word problem, and you're going to have to create your own equations. The question will ask you to find two unknowns, like two things we don't know. So the first thing, and this is very important and students hate to do this step, but you need to first define your variables. You need to tell me what each variable stands for. Then you're going to write your first equation, which will have two variables in it. Write your second equation, which will have the same two variables in it. And then we'll solve the system equations using either graphing, substitution, or elimination. Now for this class, we often at this point use substitution or elimination. We don't often graph them, but you could always make a graph. But some of them, the coefficients or the numbers in front will be decimal, and so making a graph is kind of difficult for those problems. And then we'll check our answers and make sure those answers are reasonable. Like most of these things we're talking about items, so you shouldn't have a negative number. If you do, then it's not reasonable and you probably made a mistake. So you want to think about, like, does it make sense that that could be your answer? So let's look at an example. So I picked examples that match up with the types that are on the homework. So the first one is a collection of dimes and quarters is worth $15.25. There's 103 coins in all. How many of each are there? Okay. So we're trying to find how many dimes and quarters. So we're gonna and you can use X and Y, or you can use letters to indicate dimes and quarters. It doesn't matter, but I'm gonna just use X and Y. We're gonna let X equal the number of dimes and Y equal the number of quarters. And so that is your first step. You need to define what each variable stands for and be specific. Okay, so then because I'm trying to find two things, I have to have two equations. Okay? So I'm going to have two equations. So the one equation has to do in this case with how much it's worth. I know a total for how much it's worth. And the second thing I know is how many coins there are. Okay, so it doesn't matter which one you do first, but if I talk about my first equation being about the number of coins, then what my equation would look like is the total is 103. So if I took how many dimes and how many quarters, I would add those two together to get the number of coins I have, which is 103. So my first equation is just X plus Y equals 103. So that's based on the number of coins. The second equation is based on the dollar amount or the amount of money I have. And so in this case, we have to use what we know about dimes and quarters. So we know that dimes are 10 cents, which is 0.10. And we know that quarters are 25 cents, which are 0.25. So to get the amount of money we would have, we would take 10 cents and multiply by how many dimes I would get. That would give me how much I made in dimes. And I would take 25 cents and multiply by how many quarters I would get to get how much money I have in quarters. And then to get the total, I would add those two together, which would give me 1525. So what that will look like is I take the amount dimes are worth, which is 10 cents, and I multiply it by the number of dimes, which is X. And then I take 25 cents and I multiply it by the number of quarters, which is Y. And I would add those two together and that would give me my total, which is 1525. So that is the main new thing. We have to write our two equations and then we need to solve it. And you can pick elimination or substitution. Again, this one would be really tricky with graphing, so I wouldn't do graphing. Okay? So if I look at my equations, I notice this one just has X and Y and no number in front of it. So usually when that happens, it's easier sometimes to solve by substitution. So I'm going to do that method. Okay. So to remember, to solve by substitution, I have to get one of the variables by itself. So let's just pick X. So I'm going to solve my equation for X. So I have X plus Y equals 103. I'm going to subtract Y from both sides and I get X equals 103 minus Y. Okay, or you can put negative Y plus 103. Then our second step was to take this equation, what X is equal to, and replace X with it. So I have 0.10 times what X is equal to, which is the 103 minus Y. So I'm replacing this X with that, plus, and then nothing else changes. And then I solve it. So the first thing is I have to distribute my 0.10. Okay, so if I do that, we're gonna leave these as decimals. I get 10.3 minus 0.10y. Okay, I did 0.10 times 103, which is 10.3, plus 0.25y equals 15.25. Combine my like terms here and here. Okay, so I get 10.3 minus, and then I'm gonna do negative 0.10 plus 0.25. Which gives me a positive 0.15y equals 15.25. Get the numbers to the same side, so subtract the 10.3. And we get 0.15y equals 4.95. And then the last step is to divide by 0.15. And y equals 33. Okay, and for these, because we're talking about number of coins, we should get whole numbers. So again, make sure your answer is reasonable. If you get a decimal, probably something's wrong. Okay, so that's my y. Then to get my x, I can use the equation here because it's an x equals. And so we substitute it back in. So x equals 103 minus 33, which is 70. Okay. And so again, X stands for dimes. So I have 70 dimes and 33 quarters. Okay, and then you want to check it. So both of those are reasonable answers. We're going to check it in our equations. So my first equation was X plus Y equals 103. So I want to make sure that 33 plus 70 equals 103, which it does. Okay, and then I want to check it in my second equation, the 0.10x plus 0.25y equals 1525. So I'm gonna plug these in. And then again, I would just, hold on. Okay, so I switched X and Y. X was 70 and Y was 33. Okay, I switched it here too, but it won't matter because I'm just adding them. But it will matter in the second one. Okay, so we're gonna do 0.10 times 70, which is 7 plus 0.25 times 33, which is 825. And then 7 plus 825 is 1525. So we're good. Okay, so that's an example of how to solve systems of equations using the applications. And so the biggest thing is you will have to write your own equations.